Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, a podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connection so you can have a thriving marriage. All right, so today we want to talk about 5 ways to express yourself clearly, if possible, over email or text. All right, so welcome, Nina. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic today.
Yeah, it's a good one. Lots of people setting their life on fire over text.
Yes. So, all right. So, I want to kind of touch on just the idea of how interpretation is a factor here and how language is a factor here. And I was just thinking about the Bible and how many translations exist today. I looked it up. I did a random AI search and found that there is over 900 different translations of the Bible, which is, I know, insane, right? And then you add to that the thousands of languages that exist around the world. And I just think about the nuances of language and how we all interpret things differently through our own filters. There's just a lot of opportunity to get the wrong message, say the wrong message in all of that.
Mhm.
And then I was thinking about our couples that we work with and how sometimes the communication is over text or email, and how that just can really mess up things, especially if they're going through a season of hardship or conflict. And just one word can like blow up things, right? So I wanted to talk about that today and how we can maybe clean up that mess, or maybe some tips around how to do that well, where we can maybe avoid some of those pitfalls. All right. So if you don't do this well, then you can end up doing more cleanup than you planned for. So let's dig in. But before we do that, I want to also direct our listeners to our website, greaterimpactwives.org. We have a free PDF called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells for you to download. We also have a marriage assessment for you to take to sort of get an idea of where things are in your marriage. And, we also have coaching and other products available for you if you're interested. So, all right. So I don't know if you remember, maybe this happened to you, maybe it didn't. But one of the core memories I have from elementary school is that whole exercise where the teacher lines up the kids, then she starts with the first kid in line and she gives that kid a statement. And then the task is you repeat the statement only once to your neighbor, and then your neighbor has to keep going until you get to the end of the line. And then finally, you get the last person to say out loud what they heard. And every time, it never fails, it never ends up being the original thing that
Mhm.
was said. And
Mhm.
I just think about how that's such a great example of how we can hear one thing or we can say something else, and just there's so much opportunity for misinterpretation. So, what are your thoughts about that and how it shows up? Just I would say in our communication verbally, but also via text or email.
Yeah. So there's, gosh, it's all hard.
It's all hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all hard. If your marriage is in a rough spot, communication is difficult anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If you know how to handle that stuff, when you're in the middle of a conflict, it's not that bad, but that requires an awful lot of restraint on your part to not be snotty and or cruel or whatever. And the problem with texting is that you get such thin interpretation of what's actually there that is meaningful. I kind of have a rule for people. If you need more than 3 sentences, don't say it over text.
That's
You
good.
know, yeah, 2 or 3 sentences, better one, And it's funny that you picked this topic because this week I got a text on Monday from a client. It was long. It was like I don't know how many screens on my phone that this thing went through. It was just a lot. And about halfway through it, I was like, I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know what this is about. I was just completely lost. And I thought she was saying one thing,
Yeah.
and I started to write a response, and then I thought, well, I'll go back and look. And so I did. And then on the second go around, it was like, oh no, this I'm not reading this properly at all. And thank God I didn't hit send. So we have those situations where we get way too much information, and then we just don't even know what is being said, and then we respond to stuff inaccurately. The other thing I see couples do when they're mad at each other, or parents or kids, and they're just upset, is they will emotion text just
Hmm.
what they're thinking and feeling, and then they'll hit send, and that then causes so many problems. It's just, here's some gasoline for your fire, and it makes everything worse. So the rule of we shouldn't have any communication when we're emotional, like that's a gold standard, greater impact boundary. Certainly applies to text, because I've seen zero people do that well, myself included. Don't text when emotional. It's like driving while drunk. Don't do it.
Yeah. So what about the person that's like, well, if I don't respond immediately, then I'll forget what I want to say. And, that kind of thing, which also happens in verbal
Yeah.
interactions as well. Like I'm one of those people where I'm like, either I won't know what to say or I'll think of something and then I'll forget it later. And then I'm
Mhm.
like 2 days later thinking, I should have said that kind of thing,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what
If
about
it's that important, say it then. If it's not, don't worry about it. It wasn't that big a deal.
mm,
People worry, especially in disagreements. They're like, oh, but if I actually acknowledge this other person's point of view, I'm going to let go of my opinion. It's like, no, you won't. You'll remember that you disagree. You
yeah.
really will. And validation is really what people need more than anything. A simple, wow, that sounds hard. Just that phrase. Wow, that sounds hard.
Hmm.
Glad to hear you're going through this, even if it's about you, like might be all you can muster in that moment, but acknowledge and then be done. And
Yeah.
then have the conversation in person when everybody's calm and in a good enough frame of mind.
Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness too to even like stop and pause to say, wait, how do I feel about what just happened or what I just read? Because chances are, if you're responding quickly and you haven't taken a moment to just notice your own reaction, you're no matter what you have to say, whether it's helpful or
Mhm.
not, it probably won't come across that way because you're full of emotion.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's good. The other thing that I feel like um we don't really get in text or email is like the tone or the emphasis of certain words. Like I saw a Facebook post this week circulating and it kind of showed that in one sentence where one word was highlighted in the sentence and it had one interpretation and
Yeah.
then the same sentence a different word was highlighted and it had a completely different interpretation. So it's interesting how just that one word change can change
Mhm.
the meaning of the entire sentence.
Yeah.
So,
I never said she stole the money. I never
yeah.
said she stole the money. I never said she stole the money.
Mhm.
Yeah, we used to do that exercise in Carnegie, and it's really powerful. It's like, whoa, the tonation actually really matters. And so you lose 100% of that in text. And then, so if we understand that most people are insecure, thinking about themselves, worried, blah, 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 they're going to misinterpret whatever it is that you just said into the worst possible way of thinking about it for themselves. And if you have conflict with them, they're going to do that to you too. So don't. Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. And then there are the people that use all caps, my favorite.
Oh
Like,
my, yes. Yes. Aren't they all like 95 now? Yeah. or 90 or
Dinosaurs.
something. Like a lot, for a while, they just didn't know any better, and now they just don't care enough to change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Ah,
It happens in corporate America more often than it should, but it's like the running joke. It's like they're screaming at me, this
yeah.
person, who loves caps or loves bold or loves highlight. And it's like, okay, I get
Yeah, or
it.
they quote what you said back to you with a blunt question, and it's hard not to go, is that an assault? Like,
Yes.
what
Are
is
you,
that?
are you being sarcastic? What's
Yeah.
happening here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what is that quote thing? And I hate that. You can copy the whole thing and then stick it back there and then, did you mean X by that? Like, um, well, is that the right question? No, it's not. Anyway, sorry.
So, all right. So I'm hearing that we need to pause. I'm hearing that if you're emotional, it's probably not a good idea to respond immediately. Try not to use caps if possible. And you know what? Just consider that there might be tone missing or, a use of a word in the wrong place here. So,
Mhm.
um, what about when there's a history, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, of, conflict, and this person, their sensitivities, you might have your own sensitivities and wounding. Is it ever wise to just stick to the facts when you're dealing with a person or having to communicate over text? Is it just better to leave all of the fluff out, so to speak? Like, are there ever situations that call for that, where you just state the fact and
Mhm.
have nothing else?
Right. Yeah. So, that's actually kind of a thing. When you're dealing with men, especially, you
Mm,
just give them the facts about the situation. And I had a really interesting learning watching some people dialogue back and forth about who was supposed to pick a kid up at a certain time.
hmm.
And I listened to both sides of the story, and it was all over text. And it was it was just kind of interesting and very typical. The wife was explaining why she was sure that she had said this particular time because there were 14 other things that were related. And you could almost hear the husband's eyes just glaze over and just it was almost audible. He's like, wait, yeah, you said all of that, but I just needed to know, is it this time or that time? I don't need to know the why of any of that. What time is the thing? She's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, but I figured you were upset at me because, the thing that happened yesterday. That's like the poor guy. He just asked a simple question. And then they ended up in conflict and who doesn't do this sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm not blaming her for this. I've seen, both sides of that equation regardless of gender, but you start making up these stories in your head where your spouse is the evil villain or they think that you are and maybe you are, but you just have these worries that then infiltrate this thing that could have just been really clearly said, "Hey, Joe's done at 5:30. I can't get there till 6. That's not safe for him. Can you pick him up?"
Hmm.
The end.
The end.
That's it,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
just, can you pick Joe up at 5:30? That's even better than the first one. It's just there's a lot of and I'm as bad at it as anybody, adding the fluff.
Hmm.
Because sometimes people can't hear things said the way you're saying it.
Yes.
So you try a different way, but often, and this is a habit I'm working on, often we'll go right on into the second way of saying it before we realize whether or not they actually get it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you ask somebody a yes or no question, stop talking.
Just stop and wait for the
Great.
answer.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
It's so true. I feel like women, I mean, are just, I shouldn't generalize, but if you're a communicator and you like words, you're probably going to be one of those people that likes fluff. So like you're going to want to give the context, and you're going to want to give the 2 and 3 different versions of the thing, and you think it's helpful, but if you're dealing with somebody that isn't, or wants just the meat
Yeah.
and nothing else, that's not really effective.
Yeah.
So, and then vice versa, if you're not a big communicator and you're dealing with someone that wants more,
Hmm.
it's also challenging because you're like, I said it already.
Yeah.
How many different ways do you want me to say this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
I've noticed a stupid thing that I do, and I think it's because I'm almost 60. I'll just add a little information in a totally new text that isn't really relevant or necessary. But if I was talking to the person, I'd probably say it. And then the next thing I know, I've sent 5 texts. Yeah.
Yeah,
In like 27 seconds.
yeah,
You know, and then my poor, I usually do this to my daughter-in-law, and she's just so gracious, she's patient and everything. And she never says anything about it, but I'll notice that I'm doing that. And I'm like, what are you doing, Nina? Like, why are you like this? You're acting like an old lady. And I don't know. I honestly don't know what's different about that. Probably because I just see her as a friend, and I'll
yeah,
do that with some of my friends you know, it's kind of dumb. It's a very casual way of communicating that's, not useful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some people might find that useful. Like if it's something that, like, for instance, a coaching session, and you're like, oh yeah, I saw some stats or some research on,
Mhm.
men's brains versus women's brains. Here's an article. That's the kind of stuff like you might want
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's good. Um, okay, so what about when it just keeps getting worse? Like you're going back and forth, it's a mess, and it's not really becoming clear.
Mhm.
Is there a moment where you're like, okay, I gotta pick up the phone at this
Mhm.
point,
Yeah.
where it's just you're in 2 different stratospheres, and
Mhm.
it's time to just have a conversation.
Yeah. If it's difficult at all, like when people's feelings start getting hurt, like, I can't believe you just said that to me. It's like, wait, whoa. I'll type that. Of course I don't do this anymore, but back when this was new, like
Mhm.
we thought we'd try this, and it doesn't work. So as soon as you notice anybody's emotional thing, you're like, hold on, I'm gonna call you. And so you pick up the phone, right? Hopefully they'll answer. And then if they don't, and I've had people do this to me where they come back and they just keep texting me, and I'm like, I want to talk to you on the phone. And they just ignore that, and then they just keep texting. And then I'll start sending hearts. I love you. When you're ready to talk to me on the phone, let me know. I'm not going to read any of this. Heart. And then they
Mm.
send it off. And they'll keep sending me stuff. And I'll say the same thing like 5 times. That is a time where I'll copy my text. I love you. I'll talk about this on the phone with you. Let me know when you're ready. Heart.
Yeah.
Send. That's it. And I won't go back and read any of that vitriol. It's just, they don't mean half the stuff they're saying when they're that worked up.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to entertain evil, and I don't want to know. I just don't. If they can't get to a place where we can't have an adult conversation, I mean, I'm not going to torture myself with what on earth this is, and then it'll be 28 times worse because it's in text. So
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
email's the same way, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You don't do conflict over text. No, adults don't do that.
Adults don't
I
do
mean,
that.
some do, but they're not acting like adults in those moments. Let's say that.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned a heart emoji. So that's a whole nother language in itself. Especially if you're a parent of a teenager or a young
Mhm.
adult. Even emojis, I feel like, can get misinterpreted. You can
Mhm.
send one thing and it means something completely different because you're just clueless. But you have a good intention sometimes, even with that, and that can go left. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to try to be cool when my kids were living at home, and my daughter would call me. I think my sons would just kind of eye roll and be like, "That's just mom." But my daughter would call me on it, and she'd text me back, "What is it you're trying to say with that emoji?" And a
Hmm.
question mark, and I'm like, "Well, isn't that the one that's like you're so cool or whatever it is?" And she'd be like, "No, mom. Here's what it means." And I'd be like, "Oh, that's not what I meant."
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So I just kind of stopped using all but the really big smiley face and heart and broken heart and the prayer one. Like I got 6 emojis I use all the time. And then I'll throw a dog or a horse in there that are just for no reason whatsoever. And when I do that, she's like, "You don't know how to use emojis." And she's right. I don't. So I do what makes me happy and causes the least amount of conflict. I don't want to figure it out. Have you seen how many of those things there are?
There's a million and they keep adding them. That's
Yeah.
the thing. It's like, I never noticed this one before. Okay. I actually have gone to an emoji Wikipedia. There's websites.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes, where you can look up the meaning and then there's different ones for different platforms. So
No.
yes.
I am so out of touch. The day has happened. I can't even see those things. Like my eyesight's getting bad on me as I'm aging. You know, you hit 40 and things start to fall apart. And I've been 40 for longer than a minute. So my vision is just, I can't even see what half of those things are. I'm like, if I can't understand what it is that they're doing, I'm not going to post that someplace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's safest, I think,
Yeah,
approach.
fair. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's still listening. I've just outed myself as the least cool person.
Well, I might as well join you because like here I am looking up dictionaries for emojis, so that's not cool either. So
Well, you have kids in the age group that'll at least keep you somewhat educated, and you'll be able to pull it off for another decade or so. So you
yeah,
go you.
I don't know. Okay. Well, I feel like we've given our listeners a few ideas. Whether you're in a corporate environment or you're texting a loved one, if things aren't, going well and you see there's some confusion happening, first thing to do, if you're on the receiving end of that, is just pause, because a response quickly probably isn't a good idea. Check your emotions, make sure you're not triggered and going to make things worse. Try to avoid using all caps, as I mentioned. It's never a good idea. Um, if you know the relationship is a sensitive one, consider that and consider how you might, avoid certain triggers. It might be a good idea to just use less words. Less is more. Stick to the facts if you need to. And then finally, if it's still not getting better, just pick up the phone, and try to resolve it that way. That's usually the best way. That way you can hear all of the inflection and tone and emphasis that you just won't get over text or email. All right. Any last thoughts, Nina, before we wrap up?
You know, you and I both grew up in worlds where texting wasn't an option, and we had
Right.
to wait to either use the phone because our big sister was on the phone or mom or somebody was on the phone. So if we wanted to talk to one of our friends, we had to wait to use the phone, or we had to go outside and walk to their house, you know, to to have a conversation. And I just this is gonna sound so old school, and it is, but the way to communicate effectively with people is to be with them, so
Mm,
that they get your energy. That our hearts can connect. There's electromagnetic waves when we're within 11 feet of each other. We can share hormones. We can bond. Um, and so many people are so lonely right now.
mhm.
Like, so I just want to encourage our listeners to let's do some connecting, like for real. Like, not pretend that our friendship is the same because it's over text all the time now. Let's get together. You actually need an hour and a half every 2 weeks minimum to maintain the status of a relationship that's healthy. So if you want to build a relationship with somebody, you got to put more time in than that. And it's got to be physical, in person. So I just want to encourage people to do that, not just with their spouse, but with their friends, with their family, be intentional, be present physically. And so what if it's old fashioned? It is more rewarding and you won't feel as lonely as you do.
Well, on that note, we're gonna head on out. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to check out our website. We also have more episodes on this channel around how to communicate well and even do it in hard situations where there's a lot of conflict. So we hope you enjoyed today's conversation and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.